Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write sometimes for Salt Lake City Weekly, and I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And my name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living.
Yeah, you are. I remembered that time.
So this week, as we do every week, we have some movies we're going to talk about. Before we dig into them, we want to remind you about our Patreon. Every week we put out exclusive bonus episodes, and this week's exclusive episode is on the 1986 film Pretty in Pink. So if you're a patron, go check it out. And if you're not a patron, maybe consider joining. So for the films this week that we're going to be covering, we're first going to kick off with the Boston Israeli Film Festival. Then we're going to talk about Jumbo. We're going to talk about Sophie Jones, and we're going to finish it up with Moxie. So Evan, why don't you kick off this week's show telling us about the films you saw at the Boston Israeli Film Festival?
Sure. Yeah. So the festival is wrapping up today as we're recording this show. But last week I mentioned some shorts that I saw, and in between last week and this week I saw some feature-length films, a mix of narratives and documentaries. But I wanted to focus on two narratives that I saw. I wanted to talk about Here We Are, and the other film is called Love and Suspenders. So Here We Are is a story about a father and son. The son has autism, or is autistic rather, and they have a pretty comfortable life together. They have a lot of fun together, and they have a really good rhythm, and they have they're just kind of going along, and they seem to just have a really good flow. And the father, Aharon, who's played by Shai Avivi, is the actor's name. You find out that he's a graphic designer who left work to, raise his son and just be really close to him. And so he's very attached. And his wife, who he's separate, his ex-wife, is really pushing for their son, Ori, to go and live in a group home, and be in a place where he can be around, his peers, and kind of push him outside of his comfort zone a little bit. And so Haran he's not thrilled about this. So he kind of ends up absconding with Ori and taking this kind of impromptu road trip to kind of run away from this problem, because he really thinks that this is a bad move. They've just developed a really good rhythm together, and he's got all these kind of coping mechanisms and things in place. Every day he makes his son these, pasta stars, and that's the meal, and just he's built in all these great routines, and it seems like they have such a comfortable relationship. And so this is a part road trip movie, but it's also a drama about a father coming to grips with the fact that maybe it's not that his son isn't ready for change or not capable of change. Maybe it's more his problem that he's not ready to let go. And it's along the way they have a lot of situations where you can kind of see that Ori is not he's not been equipped to interact with people. There's a scene where he's in a pool, and he's standing around some women, but he's kind of hovering. And then, his dad realizes that he has an erection. And so he's kind of taking him away from the people. There's just a few situations, misunderstandings or things that he's not equipped to deal with because he hasn't had that experience. And so it's just one of those films where you're okay, I'm seeing why his dad thinks that ultimately it might be better for him to stay living with him. But in the end, it really is the kind of thing where once he does have that opportunity to be with his peers, he does fit in, and you find out that he's also very creative. He loves drawing, and he loves art and photography. And so he has this kind of creative knack, just like his father. And so, yeah, it's a drama. It definitely raises a lot of, tough, challenging questions. And I think it does a lot to challenge our assumptions about, the kinds of lives that autistic people can lead, and how independent they can be. And so I think it challenges you in a good way by kind of showing you this father's process and how he has to kind of come to these realizations on his own and see that his son can thrive on his own. And yeah, so I mean, it definitely is the kind of movie that makes you feel uncomfortable. It tugs on some heartstrings. I think it's well acted. There's definitely some light homage to classic film, because one of Ori's things is that he is really into Charlie Chaplin, and so wherever he goes, he takes his portable DVD player and he's always watching Charlie Chaplin. So there's this kind of like light homage to like classic film and to Chaplin, and so that's like a piece of the plot. And like later on in the film, we find out that he kind of, once he kind of starts integrating himself into this like group home where he's living, he has like an instant where he like breaks a window because he's trying to be like Charlie Chaplin. So that's definitely in like a kind of underlying element as well. But I like this movie. It's just, it's like I said, it's a tough story. It asks tough questions of you, and I don't know. I found it moving.
Yay.
And so the other one I wanted to talk about is called Love and Suspenders, which is it's a rom-com, and Love and Suspenders seems to be an expression of some kind, but I didn't really have a lot of luck kind of tracking down like what that means. It seems to be like an expression that comes up in the movie, and I didn't have a lot of luck figuring out what that means in the context of like Israeli culture. But it's just one of those like cute rom-coms. The story is about this woman. It's a widow and a widower, and Tammy is the main character, and you see in the beginning that she's a terrible driver. There's just like a montage of her being on her phone, not paying attention. Her car's all dinged up, like it's clear that she's like gotten into trouble a bunch of times for like bad driving. And she's backing out in this parking lot in a grocery store, and Benno is walking by, and he gets hit by her car. And so she kind of like panics and calls her son. She's like, what can I do? Like, I'm going to get in really big trouble. Like, I know it's like, I'm basically like one strike away from like possibly losing my license. So he's like, I don't know, do what you can to like, be nice to the guy, and like maybe he won't like report you. So she like gives him a ride home, and then she's like hanging out with him in his apartment, and they strike up a relationship. And it's just this kind of like cute rom-com about, finding love again later in life. And it's just like one disaster after another in the beginning. Like when she's at his apartment, she's like, oh, I'll go make us some coffee. And she like turns on the kettle and like blows out the power in his apartment. And so like he can't stay in his own apartment because like an electrician has to come by. So of course there's an excuse for her to invite him to stay with her. And so she lives in this like really fancy like community for older folks, and it's just like then she becomes like the talk of the complex or whatever, because she's got this guy who's staying with her, and who is he and what's he all about. And so that drums up a lot of drama later, because there's like a rumor, it's like, oh, he's like a crook and he's just after her for her money. And so like that creates some issues between Tammy's son and Benno's daughter. They kind of like get into it about that. And then there's just like also this element of Tammy's husband. He appears as like a ghost, I guess, or they don't really like explicitly say whether he's like there as a ghost or if he's in her imagination, but he's there and he's not too happy about her starting to see somebody new. So there's like a little bit of like dealing with that element in the story. It's just one of those movies. It's just, I don't know. It's just really sweet. It's like, it's a little bit stilted in places. Like it's, relatively predictable, but there's just some like really charming characters in the film. And it's just a sweet story about finding love again. And one of the things I like about it is the ending. It's like, so they get into a fight because like, the kids don't want them to be together because the son thinks that he's a crook, and his daughter is like, well, why would you want to be with somebody who thinks you're a crook? And so they kind of separate. But there's been this underlying issue where Benno has like doesn't have the money to pay his rent. And so he gets like illegally kicked out of his apartment. And then that gets on the news. And we find out that he's been like crusading for like his wife died of cancer, but like he crusaded to like make sure that everyone gets this like important medication that she couldn't get. And so like he is like kind of has this like heroic backstory. And so they do end up like reconciling at the end, but there's this kind of like moment where they both agree, like, look, we're different people. Like we come from different worlds and like, let's be together, but we don't necessarily like have to like be in each other's worlds all the time. And I kind of love that. I know that there's something like really interesting about respecting the character's autonomy. And like they end up getting married at the end and it's really sweet, but it's like you get the sense that like they might still continue having their own apartments and having their own lives and their things that they do, because like she's a former singer and she's been training her granddaughter to sing, and like he works in a job where he's like down at the court writing letters for people who just like need help. It's like, it's kind of hard to describe. It's like people come to him and are like, I need a letter to like help me solicit this charity for money because I can't throw my son a bar mitzvah or things like that. And so I dig that it respects the character's autonomy. It's really nice. And I also like that when Tammy is having these like visions of her husband, you know how in like movies people have like visions and they're off in their own world and no one seems to notice what's going on. In this movie, people actually notice her like daydreaming or like being off in her own world. And so I kind of like thought that was funny that they actually recognized that she was kind of off in her own world, like especially toward the end when she's like at the wedding, she has this like dance with the ghost of her husband and people are just seeing her dance by herself.
You know, I don't know why I remember this, but they did that on Scrubs too. Every once in a while they'd be like, what's JD doing? It's like, oh, he's having one of his daydreams. Give him a minute. You know?
Yeah. And so I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny that they give her room to kind of be herself and to like, whether it's her imagination, whether he's really there as a ghost, whatever, they allow her to have these moments and people aren't like, oh man, look at her. Look at that weirdo. So anyway, that's Love and Suspenders. It's a cute rom-com. Dave, I think you might like it. I know both of you like rom-coms, but I think of the two, I feel like you guys would probably be more inclined to see that one.
Yeah, well, I like the title. So, no, it sounds fun.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's the Boston Israeli Film Festival.
Okay.
I was glad to cover that again and to see some fun Israeli movies.
Sweet.
All right. Well, thank you, Evan. And let's talk now about Jumbo, the French-Belgian film by Zoe Wittak and starring Noémie Merlant.
From your favorite movie ever.
Yes, right? Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Ooh.
It is amazing. Yes, and she is amazing in both. And yeah, the very quick summary is that this is a woman who is very shy, who lives with her mother and works at an amusement park, a very small one, and she falls in love with an amusement park ride.
What?
That she nicknamed Jumbo.
Mm-hmm. That is the premise. Yes.
Yeah. Its name is actually like the Move It or something, which is Move It, which is hilarious because in French, of course, they call it Le Move It because that's what you do. You put a masculine pronoun in front of an English language word or any word that isn't French. So it's Le Move It.
That is true.
So
man.
That's a very good one-line summary. And
thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead.
What a summary.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get into this if you don't mind, unless you want to, because I know how much you like the lead actor. So.
I do, and I've seen this twice. I saw this about 6 months ago or so at Nightstream Film Fest, and so I watched it again. And yeah, so no, this is a film I really like. But no, by all means, please feel free to dig in.
Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and drop the big bomb, but then go back with caveats. I kind of hated it.
Oh, I actually am very surprised. I'm very surprised.
You would think this movie would be right up my alley,
yes,
right?
I did.
And you would be correct. But I think that this is a really great idea with an incredibly shitty screenplay. And I think that it looks really good. Like the scenes in particular where Jumbo is reciprocating her love. We should mention, Evan, that it's not just that she falls in love with an amusement park ride. It falls in love with her too. So
yeah, they're in a relationship in in the film. Yes.
And
the feeling is mutual. All right.
Yes.
Indeed it is. And they have a very, what I think is, maybe kind of a realistic machine and human sex scene. I don't know.
Mhm.
It looks good. Imagine THX 1138, but also with oil, so motor oil. Or what's the movie with help me out, Megan? Scarlett Johansson.
I knew you were going to say Under the Skin. It's like Under the Skin. Yeah. But not in like a creepy, I'm going to murder you.
Right. More in like a, hey, we're going to be intimate together.
This is a consensual sexual experience with oil. Yes.
Right.
It's so funny. I thought of Under the Skin too. So that's why as soon as you said help me out, I was like, oh, he's talking about Under the Skin.
Yeah. There were a lot of things I really liked about it. I mean, her performance.
It's so good.
I can't remember her name. Nomi, what's her name?
Marlant.
Thank you. She's great. I mean, she really sells this. It's a really believable, lived-in, organic performance, which is funny to use the word organic, considering she falls in love with the machine. But and the woman who plays her mother's a terrible. She's terrible, and she's designed to be. So it's not like it's a poor performance. It's a great performance, but her mother is so loathsome that it's really difficult, and not loathsome in the sense that she's evil or she's just a dick. I mean, she's
just really selfish. Yeah,
she's a selfish dipshit. I mean,
and she's always embarrassing her and making her uncomfortable.
Yeah, and like
talking
parading
about sex.
Yeah, parading around her like half-naked lovers in the living room. It's like, come on, man, let's have some boundaries. Is the word I kept thinking.
Yes, her mother knows nothing about boundaries.
And
that is very accurate.
Yeah, I also kept thinking about how everyone sort of hints that Jean is the lead character's name, that she's mentally ill in some way, but that's never explored. It's just kind of this throwaway. It's not a throwaway thing because it's meant to like make you think about if there is something in air quotes wrong with her. But to me, she just seems like introverted almost to the point of being unable to, like, almost agoraphobic. Like she can barely like leave the house. She leaves the house and she goes and she works at the amusement park and then she goes home. That's it. That's her whole life. And I think if this were a 30-minute movie, this would be a fucking great movie. But there's like a good hour where it's just sort of, you have the big love scene, which in its own way is kind of magical, mostly because it just looks really cool. And you have a lot of really great cinematography and special effects when Jumbo is interacting with her. Like you see it. It's like this kind of ride where you've seen it before. It's got like these seats that hang down from, you get into it and then it raises up in the air and the seats hang down and then it spins around and basically makes you throw up if you're like that person. So it looks really cool and all the lights are great. And it actually, the way she's sort of become fascinated with it and she's falling in love with Jumbo and she falls off. She climbs him and she falls off and he saves her life. He like lowers himself down. He's like raised up for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe she did, whatever. And he lowers her down and like puts her on the platform to safety. And you're like, oh. But I think what really irked me was just like, you've got that creepy stalker that she works for. Who,
Mark.
And her mother trying to like basically force her into a relationship with him. Which, okay, fine, that could be fine. I wish that everybody, instead of calling her crazy and a kook and, trying to sabotage this thing, just fucking let her go for it, man. I don't think Lars and the Real Girl is a perfect movie by any means. But you know what I kind of liked about that is how everyone in that movie makes a decision like, all right, he's in love with the real girl. Okay, she's real.
But wait a minute, that's not entirely true because her mother's boyfriend does support Jean.
If you had let me continue, I would have said it was taking
a long time. No, I'm sorry.
I really appreciate
teasing you. I'm teasing.
I really appreciated that finally someone stood up for her in like really concrete, just fuck you two sort of terms. Like Mark, the general manager of the park, comes over and is talking to the mother and like saying things like, why don't you just have her like put in the loony bin? It's like, nice guy. And then the boyfriend, who has just sort of been, he's a little creepy to me, but anyway, he just comes out and he's like, you know what? Fuck you too. She's in love with the machine. Who gives a shit? You should be happy for her that she's happy. And it was like, finally, someone has like gotten to this place. But it takes like 80 minutes to get there. And then the movie, it doesn't even like, you don't even get the satisfaction at the end. At the end, she marries Jumbo, which is, I actually kind of like I feel like the first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes of this movie were great. And like the hour in the middle, it's like, but she marries Jumbo, but you don't even get the satisfaction of them realizing that Jumbo has feelings for her. Like he just like kind of takes her veil, like a breeze. It could be a breeze, you know, it's like she's wearing a veil that she's, you know, but it like, it's a veil. Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I'm pretty
sure.
It
lifts up into the sky and you know, Jean is like, he said yes. And then there are these punks like who have been making fun of her the whole movie who are coming to like give her a hard time. And then mom's boyfriend is beating the shit out of them, which is kind of funny because they're all like 15 and he's like 50. But I don't know. It's just like you don't even get the satisfaction of somebody who's not her being like, oh, Jumbo's a real person or a real thing that has feelings for her or whatever you want to say. It just... And I like when I read the premise of this, I was so excited because I was like, yes, woman falls in love with amusement park ride, score. And then I was just supremely disappointed. So, oh well. It's a good idea. It's got some really cool directorial touches and cinematography touches, but Megan?
Oh. So I disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I agree with some of the things, like the positive things you say. I definitely agree. I think the cinematography is absolutely exquisite. I love the kaleidoscopic use of neon lights for Jumbo. The opening scene where the camera's at her back and the wind is lifting her hair and she's almost being enveloped as the circle of Jumbo's lights gets closer and closer, and there's a lot of that. The oil in the kind of sex scene is enveloping her. Jumbo is enveloping her, and it really for me felt very allegorical to how love is consuming and how especially first love, especially certain kinds of love, just can really hit you and you're not sure about them, and they're kind of this monumental event. I also really, really appreciated the absolute, and it was funny, I thought it the first time, but I definitely thought it even more the second time. And then I read this in an interview and I was like, yes, I'm glad that that the director, this was on her mind. There are very queer themes happening in this film. The way Jean talks about her feelings for Jumbo when she talks to her mother, and she's like, I didn't ask for this, but this is real. It very much echoes how a queer person might come out to their parent. And her mother then throws her out of the house and is like, I don't want to see you. I don't want you in my house. Don't come back until you get that junk out of your head. And it's heartbreaking. It's brutal. And it very much feels the way so many homophobic, unaccepting parents are of their queer children. And so I really appreciated that kind of allegorical parallel. I also think this is a really fascinating, sensitive look at object sexuality, and which is a thing. And Zoe Woodcock actually read about Erica Eiffel, who is a woman who married the Eiffel Tower in 2009. And she was fascinated by that story. And in an interview at the Playlist, she said that she's always drawn to stories about outcasts, and she wanted to tell a story about an outcast. And then she read this story and she's like, oh, that's so fascinating. And so she talked to that woman. She did a lot of research on this. And I think it shows. And there are, Dave, like you said, there are definitely people like Mark and her, who's her boss, and her mother, who very much are, calling her crazy and being very ableist. But that is sadly what people who experience this go through. A lot of people think they are crazy. Like, how could you possibly have feelings for an inanimate object? And there's a great scene between Jean and Mark where they're talking, and Mark says that his mother always told him about inanimate objects, and that the feelings you feel, you imbue inanimate objects with them, to force them to love. And it's just a really interesting kind of meta intellectual thought experiment. Like, why do we care about inanimate objects? Do they, is it just a reflection of us? Is it something else? So I really, really thought this was a fascinating film and I really enjoyed it. The one thing I will say is I don't like the ending because at the wedding, it goes very much from everything that's kind of, magical. Like you said, Dave, I think that's a really beautiful and apt description. And it goes from really being sensitive and empathetic to this kind of almost zany caper where they're running away.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's so jarring. It's so tonally jarring that I'm like, wait, what? And so if it had just stopped at like Jumbo lifting her veil, or if it had gone to a more surreal place or something, it would have been just perfectly complete and great in that way. But the ending, it's like, it kind of undermines it a bit. But at the same time, I still really enjoyed the film. And I really enjoyed watching it a second time too, and picked up on more things the second time around that I hadn't quite thought of, or maybe the seeds were planted the first time. So, and yeah, Noemi Marland gives such a fantastic performance. She's amazing. And you're absolutely right. She definitely sells it. And through her hand gestures and her looks and her body language, just everything is just perfect.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this.
Fair enough. I think it had a lot of elements that I liked, but more that I didn't, more like a 2-to-1 shot. So
yeah, that's fair. I mean, this is probably not going to be a film for everybody, but like I said, it kind of, in a very different way, it kind of reminded me of Swallow and how Swallow does such a really interesting job exploring Pika. And this does a really interesting job exploring object sexuality. So, yeah.
Yeah. If the whole thing had been as committed as her performance.
her performance definitely is committed. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I mean, doesn't sound like it's a movie for you, Evan, based on your reactions.
No. No. And for other reasons too. As a former amusement park ride operator, it disturbs me on that level as well.
I did keep wondering if Jumbo was like going to have some malfunction and accidentally crush her or something like that, or whether it was going to envelop her and she would become part of it, but that didn't happen.
And there's part of me that kind of wanted it to be weirder, but I'm also glad it didn't. But I'm glad it didn't go that route. I'm glad that it kind of touches on weirdness. I don't know. I'm kind of torn. Part of me wants it to be weirder, but part of me is kind of glad it was more grounded in reality. So,
yeah, I think it made the mistake of grounding the reality with reality around her being full of dicks.
Yeah, aside from her mother's boyfriend. Yeah. But I don't buy that her mother would have had that quick of a turnaround either.
I don't know.
That she would have been that accepting all of a sudden when she'd been such an asshole to her the rest of the film. But anyway. But it definitely is an unusual film, and that I very much appreciated.
For totes.
So let's talk about our next film, Sophie Jones. And this is directed by Jessie Barr. It is co-written by Jessie Barr and Jessica Barr, her cousin. And Jessica Barr also stars in this as the protagonist, the eponymous protagonist. No, the titular. No, the eponymous. Sophie Jones.
Yeah.
So, and this is a film about a 16-year-old girl whose mother has died, and she's dealing with the aftermath of her grief. And basically, she's dealing with that by trying to hook up and sleep with whomever she can.
Right.
So, guys.
And that's basically it.
That's basically it.
Kind of traces like 2 years in her life. It's, it kind of like traces like a long period of time where it kind of like, it's not like a jump, but it just kind of like goes from period, like from scene to scene, and that time has elapsed until you kind of like arrive at the end and you're like, okay, a lot of time has passed since we've like first met Sophie and where we are.
I didn't quite realize how much time until she's talking about college and like driving off. And yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you guys think of it? Oh.
I really wanted to like it. I really, like when I read the description when we got the emails, like Sophie Jones, blah, 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 blue. I was like, sold. And then I watched it and I was like, okay. But I'd rather hear what you guys hear first because I want to know just how far down the rabbit hole I should go. So one of you go.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I respect what it's doing from the perspective of showing someone processing grief and how people process grief in different ways, especially if you're a teenager and you've got other things on your mind in addition to grieving the loss of a parent. And so I liked seeing her go through that process and hitting snags in the process. And I dug that aspect of it. And I also really enjoyed the scenes where she was in her car. Like the film, I think, did a really good job of like showing how when you're that age and you can drive around, how your car becomes like a place where you have all this independence, but also like the space to process emotions. Like I feel like the times where we really see her dealing with grief or any other kind of emotions, whether it's like anger or just rocking out, it's in her car.
Yeah, it's definitely a safe haven for her, and I agree with you. I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It's very slow, but I actually really like slow films, so I was on board with that.
Yeah.
I really like how it was so shaky cam kind of annoys me, but at the same time, I like that the camera was so shaky and the editing was so
Mhm.
choppy because it very much underscored how she feels so unstable with her grief and how she's doesn't really have her footing and she's not really sure what she's doing, which she kind of echoes at the end when she's talking to that classmate Lily, who's also lost her mother. And Lily's like, how did you do it? What did you do? And she's like, I don't even know. You'd think I'd know, and I don't.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so there's that. And there's definitely things I liked. Like I liked her argument with her best friend Claire when Claire is very much trying to look out for her and is like, hey, this, you're kind of acting different. You're basically just trying to sleep with everybody. And she's like, so what? Who cares? And
Mhm.
she's like, well, guys are dicks. They don't care about you. They just see us as objects and just, want to fuck and that's it. And she's like,
Mhm.
okay, so what? Who cares? And she's like, well, people are talking. And she's like, well, I don't give a shit what people think and I don't care. And if you care, fuck off. And it was just like, whoa. But it really
Yeah.
captures her rage and just how she's so all over the place with her emotions. And she's trying to bury herself in sex so she can either feel something because she's numb or because she wants to feel something completely different than what she is feeling. And I think that's a really fascinating way to look at grief and to explore grief and to tap into that,
Mhm.
especially for a teen. And the fact that she is, using her sexuality as a way to cope, as a coping mechanism, and as a way to kind of navigate the world. It's a really intriguing way to look at it. And it's a perspective we don't see often enough in coming of age films. And it's one I really appreciated.
Mhm. Yeah, I liked that aspect of the movie and that conversation that you mentioned. I understood where her friend was coming from, and I think she was coming from a good place, but she
Mhm.
just the way she worded it was just so bad. Like you knew that Sophie was going to blow up from
When
that conversation.
when she
because
got to people are talking, I was like, no.
that's not the direction you go in if you're, it's-
Yeah.
So,
But I chalk some of that up to just, being young and not having a good way of articulating feelings, even if you're coming from a good place and you mean well. Yeah, I I found myself early in the film getting mixed up between her sister and her friend because I felt like they were both blondes. So I kept seeing them in scenes and was like, wait a minute. I had to like mentally sort that out. I was like, she is sister and this is her friend. And I was like, it just took me a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when the sister first appeared, I was like, "Oh, she has a sister?" That's how I felt. But Megan, you mentioned that the movie is slow, and
Mhm.
usually that's like my calling card. I'm like, a 3-hour movie where people sit across from each other and just stare. Yes, but
Mhm.
this was a little slow even for me, and I think it was redeemed a lot by is it Jessica Barr or Jessie who played Sophie Jones?
Jessica Barr.
Jessica. Okay, I thought her performance, if this had been a lesser performance, we would have had some serious fucking trouble. There were also things about it, just like kind of watching, and this is not really the movie's fault, but just kind of like watching how teenage boys act. It's just like fucking just stop being an
Mhm.
idiot, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess he's the boyfriend. I don't know what you would call him. The guy that she's with the most. I can't even remember his name.
Yeah. Kevin.
Kevin. he's coming from a good place too. It's like, you don't tell me about things and I don't understand what's going on with you. And okay, I can understand why you feel that way because it's true, but also maybe have a little more sensitivity to the dead parent thing. I don't know. It's like, your parent didn't die, hers did. And to your point, Kevin, you do not know what she's going through. And maybe for that reason, you should just chill the fuck out. But so I had a lot of that with a lot of the characters. Like that guy that she actually loses her virginity with, that she kind of like bites. I think she bites his hand or his fingers.
She does. Yep.
And
Yeah.
because like it's not what she thought she wanted. And his reaction is just like, look, she got scared. She bit you. Okay. She didn't bite your finger off. Be glad that she didn't bite your dick off, asshole. I mean, just
Right.
she wanted to fuck and then she didn't. Fucking take it easy.
I love that scene. I thought it was hilarious.
Mhm.
Oh, he made me so mad. I wish like it was one of those things where it's like my reaction was so visceral. I wish I could have reached into the screen through the screen and like shaken him.
No, I agree with you. I just mean it was hilarious that she bit him. I was like, good for you. Like,
Yeah. Well, it was an easy move because he tried to stick his fingers in her mouth
I
to
know.
quiet her down.
yeah,
It's
that's
like,
so disgusting. Like, dudes,
Yeah,
don't fucking
that's
do
gross.
that. Like, nobody should do that, but it's something I see a lot, on screen with dudes doing. And I'm sure they're doing it in real life too, but it's fucking disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless I kind of feel like even if someone says, hey, stick your fingers in my mouth, take a moment and be like, are you sure? So.
Well, you also don't jam your whole fucking hand in there.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Unless somebody wants that, of course. But then a consensual conversation needs to happen. But that's a whole
Yeah, I feel like that's almost
thing.
like a contractual conversation you have to have. But
yes, absolutely. As sex is and should be. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there was just a lot of stuff that just rubbed me the wrong way. And I give Sophie the character a lot of leeway for, I don't have a dead parent, so I don't know. And certainly not when I was 17 or 16 or however old she is. So I don't know how I would react. And I just kind of feel like this is grief, people. Who knows how it manifests itself? I know that you're all teenagers too, but just relax. And also her dad sucked. Fuck that guy. Just like, I'm sorry you lost your wife. That's, and it seems like it was a long illness. And so you're probably ready to move on after a year. Okay, fine. But to kind of like bring the new girlfriend over and make them have dinner with her, it's just like, why does this have to be so serious so fast? Just like, why are you bringing her home already? Okay. I mean, just shit like that.
But what is too soon? And that is, I think, a really great question.
It is a great question.
It's one Sophie asks. She's like, don't you think it's too soon? He's like, no, I don't. And at that point, I had no idea how long her mother had been dead, like zero. And then we find out, like in the next scene, like she's been dead a year,
Right.
which is not a long time, but for some people it is, I guess. So
I also think you realize when she tells Kevin, I think it's earlier, she describes like the day her mother died, and then you realize this was something they were all expecting. So she was, now we don't know how long she was ill, but you get the impression that they had time to, quote, prepare, unquote, for it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you could be like, all right, it's only been a year, Dad, which who knows if that's a long or not long, whatever. But I mean, if you've been dealing with someone dying for 4, 5, 6 years, maybe a year's not that long afterward,
Right.
So I still think he shouldn't have brought the girlfriend home. Just like, come on, man. Like, don't make them sit through this. Maybe have a conversation with, you get the impression that Dad just sort of does stuff and doesn't really care with them.
Right. No, I was agreeing with you, Dave. I think that is the situation, and it frustrates me when I see parents that don't like engage their kids in a conversation about it. They're just like, "Hey, I'm doing this," and I understand that like they're the parent and it's their life and like they can do what they want to do, but it's just shitty to do to kids to just like spring things like that on them.
Yeah. And Sophie's reaction, while pissy, is not completely unexpected, and it's not unwarranted either.
I was just going to say, it reminded me of the film, Evan, that you and I saw, Marvelous in the Black Hole, that played at Sundance, where there's a similar conversation where the father is talking about bringing the girlfriend. The protagonist flips out, which is so great. And I love that. And yeah, this is a much more subtle and subdued approach, but still we see the very much the annoyance and discomfort and the agitation about that decision about the parent moving on from the deceased parent.
So, I mean, I don't know. It was fine, but there's so much about it that. So,
but it's so interesting hearing you talk about it, Dave, because it doesn't sound like the movie irritated you. It sounds like the characters did, but I think they're supposed to annoy you. So,
well, it's kind of like the
it sounds
same
like the
way.
movie did its job.
Well, yes, but it's kind of like the same way that the mother in Jumbo is supposed to be horrible. You know, she's written that way, and I think with this in Sophie Jones, you have so many people just doing the wrong thing. It's like, can we just have one person who does the right thing? Just one. But no, we don't even get that.
It's interesting that you say that because as much as and I've said I like this, I really find the exploration of grief really fascinating, and it goes to some really interesting places. Something that really bothered me about Sophie's character is the absolute lack of consent that she exhibits throughout the film. Like, she's throwing herself at her friend Riley, and even he says no like several times, and she's still like, oh, come on, and she's just like throwing herself at him. And then with Kevin, they're about to have sex, and he's like, you're on birth control, right? And she's like, oh yeah, and then they have sex, and then come to like literally 30 seconds later, nope, she's not on birth control. And it's just like, yikes, there are so many problems with her interactions with consent, or rather lack thereof. That's considering that there are so many interactions with sex happening, it's really interesting to me how she is not exhibiting any consent whatsoever. It's unsettling, but I'm not saying it's not realistic, but it's very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Especially from a female character.
Well, God, think about how much more fucking gross it's gross. The consent thing is like, it's gross. But imagine how much more awful it would be if it were a dude. You'd just be sitting there like fucking nails on a blackboard the whole time. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. But no, I agree. I'm just saying it makes me, anytime anyone is not exhibiting consent,
for sure.
It's really visceral, like, making me wildly uncomfortable. So
I actually didn't catch with the sex scene where the boyfriend asks her if she's on birth control. I didn't hear him say that. So I didn't know that she lied to him at the beginning.
Yeah, she does.
So now you guys telling me that, I'm like, Jesus, Sophie, what the fuck? So,
yeah. So I had issues with Sophie.
Well, now I have one. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, but again, I think that's supposed. I'm gonna wager that's supposed to be the point. You're supposed to kind of have issues with everybody.
Yeah,
but maybe not, and maybe I just do. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen, and I'm not saying Jessica Biel didn't do a good job. I think she does a solid job. I personally would have liked to have seen more range from her. I don't really see a lot of it. I'd see, and there is, and this could be because it seems like she's very new to acting based on her filmography, but there's a very subtle way to act where you can be stoic or you can be numb, but you can see the emotions kind of going on in either the mouth or in the eyes or something like that. And I just feel like a lot of times she just looks dead behind the eyes. And so I'm like, okay, she's numb, but I still should be seeing something going on underneath, and I'm just not. So I think it's a solid performance, but
it's a little flat.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. It didn't fully work for me.
I agree with you, Megan, but not everyone can be Juliette Binoche. I mean, so that's all I'm saying. There's only one.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, she's young, seems new to acting, so maybe that'll come with time.
Yeah. She actually, I mean, I agree with you largely about the performance thing, but I also think I know a lot of teenagers who just like were like that. So
yeah, no, that's totally fair. Yeah. It is a very realistic performance and a very realistic film in many ways, which I really appreciated. So yeah, in that way, I did like it.
It does some good things. It goes some interesting places, but yeah, it feels kind of slow and kind of flat in places, mainly the lead performance. But yeah, I wish I liked it more.
That is fair. All right. Well, let's talk about our final film of the night, Moxie. I just love that.
Just kidding.
Oh, wait, I haven't even gotten to anything yet. Yikes.
He's booing the title.
Well, anyway, I love the name Moxie. I'm not saying I love the title of the movie, but I love the name Moxie. So this is Amy Poehler is the director of this, as well as co-starring in it. And this is written by Tamara Chestnut and Dylan Meyer, based on the novel by Jennifer Matthew. All right. So Vivian is a junior in high school and she's very shy and introverted. And so is her best friend, Claudia. And a new school year has started and a new student, Lucy, has come into town and has already had enough of the shit of the asshole captain of the football team. And because of a conversation between her and Vivian, inspired by her mother, played by Amy Poehler, about how Amy Poehler as a teenager used to protest and was very into Riot Girl. Vivian starts a zine about feminism and standing up to sexism, and she distributes it anonymously to high school students. And then a movement has started about Moxie, because the name of the group is called Moxie.
Which I think the principal says that in one of her speeches, right?
She sure does.
Right.
Who fucking uses the word Moxie? So
I love the word Moxie. But anyway. So it's all about the sexism and the double standards that girls face in high school. Yeah, and about them standing up to it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how good the movie is, but I liked it a lot. And I'm glad that we're seeing more movies where the people just talk about this shit, you know? That's where I come down. That's the short version.
All right.
So.
Evan, what did you think?
I liked it. It held my attention. Like I was into it. I liked the casts. I liked the performances. I liked where the movie was going overall. I think maybe is not as strong of a statement as I'd like it to be. I feel like we can talk about this more in a minute, but I feel like it kind of takes a weird pivot toward the end of the movie that I didn't think was really working effectively with the rest of the story. And I think Vivian, I think she's a well-intentioned character, but I don't know if it's the performance or the writing, but there are moments where I feel like we see her going through the motions of doing the right thing, especially toward the end, but I didn't remember seeing her have the realizations of why she should be doing the things that she's doing. I feel like that's kind of a miss, is that she does the right thing ultimately in the end, but I don't really see her character go through the process of realizing like why she was wrong about some of the things that she did or said. And so that I struggled with that. That's my broad strokes commentary.
Fair.
So I definitely want to dig in, because I know I have a lot to say. So, and I'm sure you guys too, once we get more underway. But I will also say that I liked the film for the most part overall too. I like that we see diversity in the cast. I like that we're seeing there are Black girls. There's Lucy's an Afro-Latina girl. We see a trans girl. We see a girl in a wheelchair. We see Claudia's Asian American. This is all great. All great. But why the fuck then is the white girl who is cis and possibly straight and who is able-bodied, why is she the protagonist? Why isn't Lucy the protagonist? Because Lucy's fucking amazing. I want to see Lucy. I wish Lucy had been the star of this film. So that was my biggest gripe.
Lucy was the new girl, right?
Lucy's the new girl, yes.
Who gets picked on by Patrick Schwarzenegger? Yeah.
Yes.
Harassed,
yes.
not picked on.
Not
harassed.
picked on, not bothered, as the principal corrects her. No. She's harassed, yes. And Lucy is great. Like, Lucy is feminist right out of the gate. Lucy is, when Vivian in the hallway says to her, she's trying to commiserate with her. And she's like, oh, Mitchell, he's a jerk. Just, awful. Just ignore him. And she's like, why should I have to ignore him? He's the dick. He should stop. I shouldn't have to ignore him. And she's 100% right. And then she's like, oh, well, if you just put your head down, he'll bother somebody else. And she's like, thanks. That's great advice. Yeah. And that's fucking terrible. Like, it's awful.
Yeah.
And so I like what this film is going for. And I agree with you, Evan. And I actually had in my notes, I like the feminist angle it's going for. I like that the issues it's talking about. I like all of that. But the problem is, and I think this is a massive writing issue, is that we don't spend enough time with any of the other characters that Vivian becomes friends with, who become a part of Moxie. They really feel, for the most part, like they're just there to show diversity. Like, oh, we're doing diversity. Like, oh, here's a trans girl. Oh, here's a wheelchair, girl in a wheelchair. Oh, here's some people of color. Like, check, check, check. And it's like, no, let's actually dig into them as characters. And we get moments of that with Lucy. We get moments of that where Claudia ends up getting suspended, and then she's talking with Vivian, and she says to Vivian, she's like, you don't understand because you're white, because my mother came to this country and sacrificed so much for me, and you just don't understand. And I love that we're getting that intersection, of race and gender, and that's great, and that's so vital. But it's just the characters are not developed fully enough to really explore that. And I know we're going to talk about the ending, but that's also my big problem with the film too, is that at the 11th hour, someone leaves a note about how they're raped. And it's like, there's only like 10 minutes left in the film. We do not have enough time to dig into rape culture. Right. And dig into rape and consent and rape culture and unpack it and to focus and center the rape survivor. Like, we just don't have enough time. And that is a wild miss on the film's part.
It's a strange pivot.
Yeah. It was a hard left turn into serious drama in a movie that is a comedy that has dramatic moments,
Right. And I really got the sense that the film is kind of, because it's very fluffy in the beginning, it's very sitcom-y and it's veneer, and it very much feels like it's trying to be a Trojan horse to kind of, lull you into the comfort and like, oh, this is going to kind of be fluffy, like a rom-com. And then it's like, oh, we're dealing with some really serious issues. And that's awesome. But yeah, that shift in the rape scene, not rape scene because you don't see it, but the talking about it in the note and everything, like, oh no, it's just it's not dealt with efficiently properly in the way it should be.
Also, it just doesn't feel like it has the care that should be given to that kind of a storyline. And like, we see Mitchell, Patrick Schwarzenegger's character, he plays such a great asshole. I also loved him in the movie Daniel Isn't Real. He's also really good and really evil in that. It's just, he's an asshole on his own. Like, he's a piece of shit guy, like, and he harasses people. And I feel like that is enough on its own. But then to like tack on the fact at the end, like, oh, he's a rapist, so like, of course we're going to like, he's going to be expelled and all the stuff is going to be taken away from him. I feel like that makes it less poignant, because it's like, then they can just pin the fact that he's like a shitty like rapist and be like, oh, well, he's gone, like, problem solved. Like, no, problem's not solved.
Right.
This whole story revolves around like sexism and these like patriarchal attitudes that permeate this entire student body, and just like, okay, toss him out. That doesn't fix the problem.
No.
It gets rid of one shithead, but it doesn't fix the problem.
But the one thing I will say that's good about that, the only thing is that Lucy says in the beginning, she says he's dangerous, and she's like, and Vivian's like, I don't think he's dangerous, and she's like, no, he's dangerous. And so I do like that facet of it, but you're absolutely right, Evan, that it does not fix the problem just to get rid of him. Yeah. It's also extremely unrealistic that the principal like immediately would be like, oh, hey, gotta come with me.
Right.
Like, yeah.
I also didn't buy that the woman who reports it like would stand up on the bench and just be like, yep, this is what happened. It's like, I don't know, you didn't join the group, you didn't do this, you left an anonymous note in the and now you're gonna stand. I don't know. That felt, I mean, I don't know how somebody would actually react. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, though, is that the evil Patrick Schwarzenegger character, or whatever, what's his fucking name? Mitchell. The moment, I think it's the second scene, he's a dick to Lucy in the English class. But then when he like slaps the soda machine and grabs her soda and fucking hawks a loogie in it, that is so... That's the first time when I just thought, this movie kind of has a tone problem, because that... I can see how they were they kind of circled the back. That's a great indicator of his underlying evil, I guess is what I'm getting at. But it takes so long to get there, and then it comes kind of out of left field, even though you have that warning. Anybody who would steal someone's soda, like cough up some phlegm, spit in it, and then hand it back to her, I have no doubt believing that he would actually be a rapist. But it was so awful to see that. Not that I wanted Lucy to have a different reaction, because how the fuck do you react to that? But it just was really, I don't know. I found that scene, frankly, kind of horrifying.
Yeah, it's like the kind of bullying you'd expect to see in like Pretty in Pink, like the 80s movie we talk about in Patreon. It's like that's the kind of like level of bullying we're used to seeing from that era. It feels kind of like, I don't know, it just feels a little bit outdated in this setting. Like it's horrible, and it is.
That's the kind of thing where a teacher would have seen that behavior over the years and flagged him almost, like presumably. I
gotta disagree with both of you.
Oh.
I disagree with both of you wildly. I don't think it's outdated at all. I think there's a big piece of it. The fact that she's not a white woman, she is a Black Afro-Latina woman. I think that also is a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I think you're right about all that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's horrifying to see, obviously, of course, and you guys are 100% right about that. I don't think it's outdated, sadly. And I think someone who's as big of a dick as that guy would definitely like throw his muscle around that way and be violent adjacent to her and be very bullying in that way. So yeah, I actually think her reaction is appropriate and perfect, because when you are near someone who is potentially about to be violent and you don't know, sometimes the best thing you can do is do nothing and just
do nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And just wait and just be quiet. And I hate to say that, but it's a very real thing to kind of freeze and be like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, no,
I don't want to do anything to set someone off.
I don't think her reaction is unrealistic or wrong. I just was like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't know how you could go through that once, basically, is the, and not sob.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think the fact that, I think it's interesting, Dave, I think you said that he would be flagged throughout the years, and you'd like to think that, but at the same time.
Well, I thought about that right when I said it, but he's also the captain of the football team, and he's white, and he's clearly rich. So he's got, adults looking out for him in high places.
Yes, he is very much inoculated in that way. And people look Thank you. And people look the other way at toxic male behavior like that and are just like, oh, it's just boys being boys. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's fine. He's just teasing, like that kind of shit. And they just brush it off and gloss it over. And then they just keep going forward and there's no repercussions. So they keep acting like dicks.
Yeah.
So I actually think that scene is great. And I think there are a lot of great moments in this. And
I didn't say it was great. I said it was horrifying.
No, I know. I'm saying I think it's great that it's horrifying. I think it does its job. It's supposed to be. Yeah. So I'm agreeing with you. I also agree with you guys that I liked it and I enjoyed this. I just wish it had gone deeper as the movie goes along and hadn't centered Vivian. I think she's the wrong person to center in this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Shauna made a comment that it's kind of like Vivian is almost like Piper from Orange is the New Black. It's like she's the main character, but she's also kind of not the main character at the same time. And she's probably like the least interesting of any of the people. So she's this like weird kind of audience conduit, but like also at the same time, it's like, why the fuck is she the protagonist? We could have made literally any other person in this movie.
That's what I said.
The lead, like you said earlier. Yeah. And it would have been a much more compelling story.
Yeah. The thing of it is, I completely agree with Shauna, not just because I said it earlier, but yeah, I mean, I think the difference though with Orange is the New Black is that Piper is, and Genji Cohen said this very, very famously, that Piper was the Trojan horse because no one was going to greenlight a show about Black women or trans women or Latina women. So she had to get a white woman, a wealthy white woman in the door. And then she opened it up to the other characters. And that's just the problem, is that it would be one thing if Vivian was kind of the gateway to these other characters, but she's not. She's just not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Claudia or Lucy would have been a better main character, more interesting main character.
Yes. Or Kiara, who's great.
Oh, yeah. Right. She's the soccer captain, right?
Yeah, she's great. She was great. I haven't seen her recently on The Walking Dead, but she's great on The Walking Dead. She's great here. Yeah, I really like her.
Oh, I wanted to point out, Megan, because I know this is a sticking point for you, the non-consensual kiss that Lucy lays on the other soccer player.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to talk about that because, yes, I'm very pissed off because what should have been a very exciting moment for two queer women of color kissing that should have been great and exciting was fucking ruined by its lack of consent. I was outraged, Dave. You are 100% correct.
Yeah. This is how well I've gotten to know you. When that happened, I was just like, oh, Megan's going to have a problem with that.
You do know me so well, and boy, did I.
Yeah.
For a film that's all about fucking feminism, I think that's what made me even more angry. I'm like, this is about feminism. It's very clear. This is trying to be very intersectional, which I appreciate, but I'm like, where the goddamn hell is the consent?
Yeah. I think that happens a lot. I mean, it probably happens a lot in real life, but in movies in particular,
Yeah.
getting consent is like, you got to watch that in a movie. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think in real life, rock and roll, man. But yeah, they got to figure out a way to like do that in a way that doesn't slow the drama to a halt. Or maybe you just have a conversation like, hey, remember when we talked about that thing and then you kissed me? That was cool. You know?
But the thing of it is, I've seen it in plenty of films and TV shows. It's very easy to do. All you have to do, like for instance, in sex, all you have to do is say, can I do this? Like if somebody's about to take your clothes off, can I do this? Is it okay? That's it. You don't need to have a big conversation. That's it.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a very easy way to do it. Yeah.
Well, Moxie.
So if I'm seeing other films do it, then this one can too. But I also want to say I do appreciate kind of the resurgence of talk about zines and Riot Girl and yeah.
Yeah, the 90s was good for something. So,
Riot Girl, grunge, yes.
Well, the thing that's you kind of forget because you get removed from it. Like some of those bands were fucking great, like, Bikini Kill and Slater Kinney and like the Amps. Well, I mean, it's basically, anyway, that's a whole thing. I could have a whole conversation about women fronted bands from the 90s.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, but I think it's great that because I was thinking about this because I didn't read the article, but I saw a headline that said something about this is bringing feminism to a generation that might not need it or something like that. And I didn't read the article, so it might go in a very different direction than what I think. But I was thinking about that while watching the film. I was like, is this needed? And I always think feminism is needed. I always think discussions about sexism and misogyny because these issues have not gone away and they're not going away. Even if they morph and change, they're not. But I do think it's interesting looking at Riot Girl in a modern context. And there very much, I think, still is something to tap into, something very relevant, that rage, that do-it-yourself mentality, the thirst for revolution, all of these things, the independence, all of it, the community. I think these are really vital for young women and young people. And I think it's really great to see it tap into. But it is kind of interesting because that is one of the things is that Riot Girl has also been criticized for not being as inclusive as it could have been or should have been to women of color. So it's kind of interesting seeing it in a modern context.
Yes. All true. I have nothing of consequence to add, I don't think, except to say that also I forgot Luscious Jackson. So don't forget that. Although they were late 80s into the 90s.
So I had a quick question. We haven't touched on this yet. So because there is a romance in this film, what did you guys think of the romance between Vivian and I can't remember his name, the guy?
Seth.
Seth, thank you, the feminist ally.
Seth from Booksmart. Yeah. I thought he was cool.
Yeah, he's great.
I liked his character a lot. And I liked their relationship a lot. And I liked that he stood up for himself later in the movie and he said some things that Vivian needed to hear because she was being a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I was like, I'm glad to see her rage, but not at him.
Yeah. Right. I liked it when he said to her, he's like, maybe you're not the person I thought you were. It's like, ooh.
Oh, that's such a dagger.
Yeah. Like, oh man. I also liked when they were in the car and she was like, let's bone. And he was like, do you really want to do this in the car before the football game? I mean, come on, man. I was like, way to go, dude.
Yeah, that was very sweet. Very romantic, very sweet. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see a gender reversal in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although the funeral home scene, pretty weird to me. I don't know if that's in the book, but that's a weird place to have a date.
Why not? It's quiet, There's not actually, there's probably not, if there are any bodies in there being prepared, they're probably locked up, hopefully, so I can't imagine any self-respecting, by the way, funeral home being like, leave the doors unlocked. I just don't, maybe an accident once, but there's a lot of merchandise in those places. So, yeah, it was a little strange, Evan. That's my long way of saying, like, yeah, this. I was like, when they go in on the coffins, I'm like, are we going to see a dead body, or are the two of them in a coffin together? Okay, they're in it.
Yeah.
So
I know, but she's getting him to listen to I think it was Bikini Kill at that time. I don't know. It could have been Slater-Kinney. But yeah, I like how she's getting him to listen to girl music in a coffin. What is happening?
Yeah.
I know this is also a side note, and it happens very early in the film, but I do also really like that Lucy kicks off the whole conversation about why are we still reading this book as far as The Great Gatsby goes. It's about written by a rich white dude about a rich white dude. If we're talking about the American dream, why aren't we reading books about immigrants, Black mothers, and working class? And I'm like, yes, thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
Yeah. And as somebody who didn't read The Great Gatsby until he was in his early 30s and then hated every moment of it, I'm right there with you, Lucy.
Yeah, but I do. Yeah, I will say, I know I think we're rightfully unpacking this film. I was going to say picking it apart, but no, I think we're unpacking it, which is important and crucial. But I think overall, I did enjoy this film. I think it is enjoyable.
Yeah.
I agree with you both about its tonal issues and inability to really tackle some of the more serious issues.
Yeah. I'm glad that Evan brought it up first, though.
You're feeling like you're Ike Barinholtz? You don't want to step on that landmine?
I love Ike Barinholtz, so I mean, well, in this part, I thought he was there's always that teacher in these movies, and I was like, you know what, I like Ike Barinholtz enough that I'm gonna let this one slide. So
I do like, though, that at the end when he's like, it's your funeral, don't do it, don't walk out and protest, but then he holds his hands up and he's got the hearts and stars in support and solidarity.
Yeah, he was okay in the end.
But yeah, do we have any final thoughts we want to say about the film?
No,
not me. I like the word Moxie, though.
Moxie's such a goddamn great word.
Yep.
Yeah. But yes, I wanted to circle back. My last thought, I wanted to circle back to something you said, Dave. Initially, you said you love that films are talking about these issues. And I would definitely say, I would argue that films always have talked about these issues, maybe sometimes in subtler ways. But I agree with you absolutely. We're getting more and more films that are dealing with these issues in a very overt way. And I love it. Here for it.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's do a recap. So Evan talked about the Boston Israeli Film Festival, and that, unfortunately, you said that ends today, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So can't see those movies, but definitely look out for them on there'll probably be there's a couple of streaming platforms. There's one called Highflix, which is like Jewish films, and then there's one called Izzy, which has Israeli films and television. So you might see them on one of those platforms if they don't get like a wide release somewhere.
And then Jumbo is available on VOD. And Dave, would you say see it or would you say skip it?
Fucking pass.
Okay, I will be the voice of dissent. I would say see it. I love that we're split.
Yeah.
Sophie Jones is also available on VOD. And what do you guys think? Would you recommend it?
It's seriously coin toss.
Yeah, I'm not on the fence about it. Leaning toward probably not, but just not because it's like terrible, but just because I found it so like middle of the road for me.
That's fair. I would say see it. I always find explorations of grief and coming of age films interesting. Well, I don't always, but I found this interesting because it's kind of a different take on it, a slightly different take. So I would say see it. And then Moxie, which you can see on Netflix.
I'd say its benefits outweigh its not benefits. So sure, see it.
Okay. And Evan?
Yeah, I'm of a similar opinion. Despite its flaws, I think on balance, it's worth seeing.
And I agree. I would say see it as well.
Yay.
Yay. All right. Well, we want to give a huge, huge thank you to our amazing editor, Otto Clammer. Otto, thank you so much for making us sound great week after week. We're so appreciative of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. Anywhere, we are there. You can find us at our website, spoilerpiece.com. You can find us all over social media. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Letterboxd. So follow us on all the social media platforms. If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to tell us, hey, I liked Sophie Jones, or hey, Dave, I liked Jumbo, or no, Megan, I hated Jumbo. If you want to tell us, agree, disagree, ask us questions, have any comments, we love hearing from you. So feel free to email us at spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can call us
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail message. We love to hear from you. And if you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. You can also go to Spoiler Piece Theater's Apple Podcast page and rate us there. That really helps us out and gets the word out about the show. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. For $1 a month, we give thank yous, shout outs on the show. For $5 a month, you get to vote in monthly polls. And this month's poll right now is about women-directed horror films, which is something I don't want to speak for all of us, but I'm really passionate about. So go vote in that poll if you're a patron. And if you're not, consider joining. And also for $5 a month, we also do exclusive weekly bonus audio every single week. So there's lots of extra Spoiler Piece if you just can't get enough of us. And for $10 a month, you get to tell us what to watch each month, and we will talk about it. And we also want to take a moment to thank our amazing patrons.
Yep. We want to say a huge thank you to Bill Scahan, to Sean Pensionar, Christopher Jensen, Bob Chipman, Charlie Nash, Davida Margolin, Zach Pigeon, Chris Wilkinson, Max Colville, Shona Glasgow, Rory Glenn, Shelley M. McCaskill, Mike, Lord of the Sith, Deirdre Crimmins, and Shauna Harris.
Thank you, patrons.
Thanks.
And thank you, listeners. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you for listening to our discussions, and we're just really appreciative. You guys are awesome. So my name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Instagram and Letterboxd at TheOpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write sometimes for some places, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on the tweets, the Instagrams, and the Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
And my name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
I love that distinction. It's important, though.
It is.
All right. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.